What's up, everybody? Welcome back to our YouTube channel. Today we are talking about a very interesting case. My name is Kenny, and I have my good friend Stefan with me.
What's up, everybody?
Tonight it's an interesting one. I hope people like it. I'm not 100% sure if they would, but let's go ahead and get into it and not waste time. So, for the 11 million viewers who tuned in on Halloween night in 1992, Ghostwatch was billed as a real life haunting that would be investigated by experts while broadcasting live. Over the next 90 minutes, many viewers did not realize that what they were watching was a scripted drama that was written to appear to be a live event. The reality TV craze of the late 90s had yet to occur, and films like The Blair Witch that blurred the lines between fact and fiction were unknown as a medium through which to tell a tale. This and more set the stage for the BBC to unknowingly launch a huge hoax on the nation that had come to trust the broadcasting giant and its talented presenters and journalists. Ghostwatch may have passed quietly into television history if it were not for the real life tragedies that would occur in its wake, leaving real people heartbroken.
In 1938, many in the American radio audience who tuned in to hear Mercury Theater's live show on the evening of October 31st, Halloween night, got the shock of their lives. Hearing actor Orson Welles perform a live dramatization of the science fiction story War of the Worlds, written by H.G. Wells, many listeners thought that they were hearing the news story covering live events. Essentially, they believed the world was under attack by alien forces that had arrived to Earth en masse to conquer it and enslave the human race. While Wells did open the program with a statement that the show was a dramatization, the story was told using repeated quote unquote live news broadcast style alerts that tricked many listeners into believing what they were hearing were actual news reports of an alien takeover. The text of the story was changed to use American cities within the drama, which caused even further fright. Additionally, the show did not go into its first commercial break almost 38 minutes into the broadcast, which occurred after the news announcers had already described the aliens releasing toxic gas over New York City, killing millions who were reportedly quote unquote dropping like flies.
Yeah, man, that whole thing is just so amazing to me. I mean, it's terrible, but it's crazy to think like back then that could happen. Like you could just hear this story, not understanding that it's live necessarily, and think the world is under attack by UFOs and aliens.
And there wasn't TV, so that is where you got your news.
Yeah, man,
So it's like going almost like going to wherever, Fox or CNN, wherever, and
yeah,
then reporting it.
super interesting, man.
Yeah.
Because of the quality of the drama, and despite assurances at the start that the program was a drama, many listeners were terrified and believed that the show was actually portraying live events. Before the age of television and, of course, the internet, there was only radio and newspapers to supply the news of the day. The radio was the source of the story, giving more credence to what many people thought was a live broadcast of real events. The entire nation was understandably riveted and terrified. Many people believed that the world was really under attack by a hostile alien force. Dozens of police officers stormed CBS's New York offices where the actors were broadcasting from, wanting to stop the broadcast. Listeners who believed the show was depicting actual real events began to take the streets, and mobs were reported in many towns and cities across the nation. Although newspapers were later said to have greatly exaggerated the level of hysteria that actually occurred that evening. While exact numbers were not tallied, it is believed that not all the many listeners tuned in to hear the War of the Worlds broadcast, as it was aired at the same time as a popular comedy show, and the newspapers were taking the opportunity to throw some shade on their rivals. But either way, the idea that anyone would hear this and actually think that it was real is very interesting to me. Although, like I said, I'm sure that the level of hysteria was truly exaggerated. Either way, if 10 people thought it, I mean, that's crazy to me.
Fast forward to England, 1992. On Halloween night, the BBC broadcast a show called Ghostwatch, in which a roving team of paranormal investigators explored reports of paranormal ghost activity, culminating in a tour of real haunted houses. The program was the product of horror writer Stephen Volk, who originally planned it as a six-part drama. But it was decided to take advantage of the Halloween holiday to present a story of a live investigation of, quote, real events. The problem was that perhaps Volk did his job a little too well. Many viewers didn't know it wasn't real. This would have dire consequences for some, as unlike with War of the Worlds, over 11 million people tuned in, and some were scared out of their wits, causing them to resort to drastic real life actions.
Ghostwatch was presented by four hosts who narrated and guided the viewers through events being shown. Michael Parkinson, a well known BBC presenter, Sarah Green, popular host of children's programming, and Green's husband, Mike Smith, who was a radio and TV host, and also Craig Charles, who was to play the role of Knobhead. The cast had much to do with the believability of the concept that they were putting forth. Michael Parkinson, who is affectionately known as Parky, was especially revered by BBC audiences and was well known and well loved journalist who was presenting fiction as fact. Many viewers bought into the premise of the show simply because of his involvement, and his skeptical attitude to the events unfolding gave it the additional touch of realism.
The concept of reality TV was unknown in 1992 and wouldn't enjoy widespread popularity until the late 90s and early aughts. The only show to date in England that attempted to blend fiction and reality was the program The Only Way is Essex. So it was not a concept that viewers would have expected or even considered. In addition to the novel concept of presenting a drama that mimicked real life and a real life event, several of the special effects employed were also considered groundbreaking for that time, such as the use of videotape instead of film for a homemade look and feel, the infrared camera that was supposed to identify ghost activity by heat, and using pixelation to obscure the faces of those being interviewed, none of which were routinely employed at this time and gave the broadcast an air of realness. So too did the fact that it was being broadcast as a live event, something that didn't happen very often, especially back then, and they were usually reserved for, charity events, telethons, stuff like that.
The production team at the BBC wanted the program to have an authentic feel, so it was not heavily advertised as a fictional drama, a made up creation, right? And in fact, the only mention of this was buried within a lengthy article in the Radio Times, which featured the face of Michael Parkinson and the name of the show. However, not everyone received the publication, and those that did may not have actually read the article in its entirety, therefore, not even seeing what was in the article about it being fiction. Out of the consumers who did read the article, it isn't known how many of them would have understood the term drama to equate fiction or that the word implied something was made up. And some would believe that the term drama merely indicated something that was broadcast on the TV. And let's not forget that the whole premise of the show was based on viewers believing that the events they were watching were authentic and happening in real time. While it speaks to the talents of horror writer Stephen Volk, perhaps he did his job too well.
During an interview, Volk described his motivation by saying, quote, "I wanted the whole nation to be terrified. They would be creating the very thing they were terrified of. What if they wanted to see a ghost to the extent that they actually created it? What if they supernaturally held hands in the dark? Millions of people all wanting the same thing to happen at the same time." End quote. And of course, as so often happens in the electronic age, many in the audience, most likely younger, more impressionable viewers, believed it simply because it was being broadcast on the television. As Terry Waite's cousin, John, said regarding the announcement of the end of the hostage crisis, quote, "I'll believe it when I see it on TV." That reflects the attitude of many at that time in history, including children who may not have the sophisticated reasoning skills to assess what they are seeing in a healthy degree of skepticism.
So, like we said before, Ghostwatch was advertised to be a live event that would explore the existence of paranormal entities through Britain, with a debate among experts as to the existence of ghosts and other types of entities. Michael Parkinson was in the studio speaking with the experts in the paranormal, while Sarah Green was at the house speaking with the family. Green's husband, Mike Smith, manned the call in phone lines, so calling in at the advertised number put the caller in touch with the real parapsychologist. Craig Charles was the reporter on the ground, mocking the entire enterprise next to an outside broadcasting unit, interviewing cold bystanders and saying how much he hated Halloween. The first half of the program was rather sedate and built the tension slowly through innuendo and supposition. Craig Charles and Sarah Green interviewed people on the street of the estate. There were veiled words about unusual happenings in one particular house inhabited by a very ordinary family. As the show progressed, people phoned in with their own brushes with the supernatural, including the occasional, drunk person calling in just to mess with people. During the second half, though, things really heated up as things began to go wrong.
Ghostwatch viewers were invited along to be vicarious witness to the events occurring in the most haunted house in Britain that belonged to Pam Early and her two daughters, Suzanne and Kim. The audience was told that a team of paranormal researchers had spent the previous 10 months investigating various claims of paranormal activity throughout Britain, but especially focusing on one home in particular, the Early House. Parkinson, meanwhile, encouraged the audience to phone in to the BBC with their own stories and experiences with the paranormal. The Early family living in Northolt was supposedly under attack by a male spirit poltergeist who was terrorizing the family. The entity, whom the Earlys had named Pipes because he was known for knocking on the pipes to announce his presence, escalated his mischief in the home until he was supposedly inhabiting or possessing the two children.
Yeah, and the pipes, that's like a normal thing that, everyone, that thing that happens in houses. That's
A
all.
ghost named Pipes is the scariest thing I've ever heard of in my life. That's a terrible, scary ghost name.
Pipes is at it again.
Pipes is coming.
As Sarah Green followed the paranormal activity around the house, the tension mounted and the Early family were subjected to increasingly terrifying experiences as the spirit of a dead man apparently entered the children. One viewer called in to tell them that someone had once committed suicide in the home, and another reported that a mutilated dog corpse was said to be recently found nearby. And quite convincingly, the Early girls were shown becoming increasingly upset over the disturbances and events occurring in their once safe home. Around an hour into the broadcast, Michael Parkinson even advised viewers they'd be preempting programming to remain with Green due to the extraordinary events taking place. Suzanne speaking in a baritone voice as she was apparently possessed by pipes and unseen cats mewling behind the walls. By the end of the show, the ghosts had taken over control of the TV cameras. At the Early's house, paramedics and police were seen arriving, and Green, who was trying to locate one of the possessed girls, disappeared into the blackness of a crawl space under the stairs. And her husband, Mike Smith, who is still broadcasting from outside and who is now visibly distressed, starts to panic about losing contact with his wife. And I think you can understand why, if someone's watching this live, they think it's real, people might start to freak out.
Yeah, especially when the hosts are starting to freak out, then
Yeah.
then it becomes a lot more real. A paranormal expert then proclaimed that the television audience had unwittingly participated in a mass seance that had further emboldened the demonic spirit of Pipes. The show ends with Parkinson also being apparently possessed by the ghost spirit. The camera shows a deserted studio apart from a dumbfounded Parkinson who wanders across the darkened stage, struggling to explain what had happened. Quote, I was genuinely wrong footed. The sense of unease was compounded after the show had ended when the announcer, as if not quite believing what he had just seen himself, quietly tells viewers that match of the day is to follow and said nothing about what had gone on before.
Ghostwatch was not only the most watched program at the time, with more than 11 million viewers tuning in, but it almost immediately had the dubious accolade of being BBC's most complained about show. The tabloids had a field day in the following weeks, crucifying the show and its producers, and then things took a darker turn, just like the program itself. The BBC had its phones staffed with only 5 operators once the show went off air, all of whom were quickly overcome by the thousands of calls that flooded in to complain. One woman reportedly went into labor due to the stress caused by watching the program, and another reported that her husband had soiled himself. A vicar phoned in to complain that even though he realized the show wasn't real, he thought the BBC had possibly raised demonic forces. Within hours, the BBC aired a brief segment that reminded viewers the show was fictional, but it was a little too late. The unanticipated and horrific damage that would soon come to light had already been done. The public criticized BBC One for using its reputation to fool viewers into thinking harm had come to the Earlys and to their hosts. During a later interview, parapsychologist Susan Blackmore said, quote, it treated the audience unfairly. It was horrid to watch the distress of the girls, real or faked. I found it overlong and occasionally disgusting. The lack of adequate warnings was irresponsible, end quote. Thousands shared her views and made their feelings known.
Green quickly appeared on children's shows to reassure younger viewers she had not been abducted or murdered by Pipes. But still, in the weeks after Ghostwatch aired, Green said she received hundreds of letters from children who had watched her walk into the cupboard underneath the stairs to meet the ghost of a child molester. She later explained, quote, "It's like grim fairy tales. Pipes was a figure of fear, a strangeness of a man being dressed as a woman. The things that are the most scary to children are the things that are slightly skewed." End quote.
I have one thing to ask real quick. And I think people in the comments will probably be asking this, so I just want to say it. Why are children even watching this show?
Because
Well, we'll talk about that more at the end, maybe.
I
But
mean, yeah, that's probably yeah, that's really the question to ask.
yeah,
Well, why was Pipes dressed as a woman?
and Pipes was also it's kind of a cute name. Like when
Yeah,
you think about it, like Pipes, it could be like a little cat's name or a dog's name.
and I'll tell
It's a
you what.
demon's name, and children are watching this for some reason. They should have been in bed.
If I relate to anyone in this story, it's Pipes. The real harm caused by the show, intentional or not, came to light. In a report published by the British Medical Journal 18 months following the broadcast of Ghostwatch, doctors at a psychiatry unit in Coventry, Don Simmons and Walter Silveira, submitted an article to the British Medical Journal recording the first cases of post traumatic stress disorder caused by the television show. Two 10-year-old boys had been referred to them. One was admitted in an inpatient's unit for 8 weeks because he would bang his head in an attempt to free himself from the thoughts of Ghostwatch and its evil spirit Pipes. Both boys were suffering from sleep disturbance and panic attacks as a result of watching the program. When the piece appeared, the journal received correspondence from other doctors relating similar cases, including consultants from Edinburgh came forward with 4 more children with similar symptoms. This isn't the worst of it, though. Within 5 days of Ghostwatch airing, 18-year-old Martin Denham took his own life. A note in his pocket read, quote, "If there is ghosts, I will now be one, and I will always be with you as one." End quote. His parents are convinced that Martin took his own life as a direct result of watching the Ghostwatch program.
Parents Percy and April settled in for the Ghostwatch broadcast with their two sons, Martin and his 14-year-old younger brother. During the show's airing, Martin seemed to become more and more withdrawn, and his mother asked if he was okay because of this, but Martin assured her he was fine. Martin had expressed long standing interest in the supernatural and phenomena like ghosts. However, the Ghost Watch show seemed to really affect him as no other program had before. In the days that followed the broadcast, the Denhams noticed a marked change in Martin. They observed Martin becoming upset when things would occur that had also happened in the early family on the show. He also became obsessed with talk of ghosts and the paranormal, even more so than before the show. The radiators in the Denham house had a habit of being noisy when warming up, and Martin suddenly asked to move bedrooms, though he never explained why. 5 days after the broadcast, Martin ended his own life. When they learned of the contents of the note found in his pocket, they became convinced that the broadcast of Ghostwatch was to blame. The passage of time has seen the Denhams' anger cool a little, although they do not watch the BBC channels still or anything that features Michael Parkinson. But they still wonder about the reasons behind Martin's decision to take his own life, citing the facts that he seemed to have everything going for him, such as a job that he enjoyed, a girlfriend he was crazy about, and he didn't seem troubled by anything significant that would give Martin a reason to do this. His mother April said, quote, "Even though he was a slow learner, he had done well for himself. He had everything going for him, and then it changed just like that after viewing the program." End quote.
Conversely, others have offered additional reasoning that may have contributed to Martin's heartbreaking decision. They say that if not for his reported learning disabilities, he might have been more psychologically equipped to deal with some transient nerves caused by the viewing of the show. When he became distraught in the days following the broadcast, he began to grow concerned he might make contact with ghosts and committed suicide. But his parents remained convinced that Ghostwatch was to blame. The Denhams fought in a judicial review into these events, which led to an investigation by the Broadcasting Standards Commission, the BSC. And the BSC eventually concluded that the corporation had, quote, a duty to do more than simply hint at the deception it was practicing on its audience, end quote. And that there had been a, quote, deliberate attempt to cultivate a sense of menace, unquote, it added. It further ruled that the show had been improperly labeled with too few warnings that it was a fictitious premise. Afterwards, the BBC issued an apology. The BBC has never broadcast Ghostwatch again, and it indeed disowned it for a good decade after its original airing. In 2002, the British Film Institute released it on DVD, and they occasionally organize screenings of the show. The Denhams are vocal of their criticism of these efforts, claiming the programming killed her son, and it's understandable why they wouldn't want it up.
Yeah. Sometimes the Ghostwatch scriptwriter Stephen Volk will attend the screenings and watch the reactions of those in the audience who know from the off that it's a drama, but who still make all the right noises in all the right places, he says. He also says he's proud of his work on the program and throws some shade on the BBC for their response. He said, quote, I think if the BBC had maybe not shut it down so completely, there might have been an attempt to have a conversation about it. In a way, that was sort of one of the questions we were trying to raise. One of the questions we wanted to get the audience to think about. What do you trust? Do you believe something because you're seeing it on TV? Because experts are talking about it? End quote. While the BBC can perhaps be forgiven for the broadcasting of the Ghostwatch program, seeing as their intentions were good and they had no reason to suspect any harm would come from it other than the innocent Halloween frights, its response, and that of writer of Stephen Volk, is deplorable to many people. Martin was a real person whose memory deserves respect, not to mention his family and loved ones. Stephen Volk has never really commented publicly on Martin's suicide, which he says is, quote, out of respect for the family. Yet, his later over the top comments about his pride in the show and the ability of the show to invoke all the right reactions from the audience, some people say that's insensitive. That's not what I'm saying. This is what a lot of people have criticized him on after the fact. Let me know what you guys think about that. Yeah, and so again, a lot of people think that the BBC's silence after was just a, was a real big issue. And yeah, I mean, like I said, a lot of people don't like how the BBC responded, how they took it away for a long time, and how they just didn't say anything about the matter at all, especially about Martin's death.
It seems weird to not acknowledge something quite like that, especially when.
And they may have acknowledged it at some point, but a lot of people, regardless of what they did say, don't think that they did enough to make that whole situation better.
Yeah,
I don't really have much of an opinion on it, of course I wasn't there at the time, and so I don't really have a firsthand experience of exactly how the BBC responded. But you know, definitely I feel like they should have been there to help Martin's family in some sort of way.
it definitely raises some questions about like the responsibility of TV programming, and they need to be more blatant with stuff. And also, this was 1992. Like, this was a different world, a world without really the internet and internet culture. I mean, I grew up watching ghost shows like this.
Yeah.
Like, I loved stuff like this. I believed in it 100%.
I think we could have. I want to know what people think in the comments, because I think we could have a pretty good divide of people that believe that Ghostwatch is responsible or is not responsible. So I kind of want to,
Yeah. I think it's probably shades of gray. I mean, to put all the blame on BBC is sort of silly. Also, we were talking about this off air, but for the family to solely blame this TV show for the death of their son just doesn't seem right to me. Like,
it's hard, it's hard to be in that position as well.
yeah.
And who knows if they're just trying to look for an answer.
When you said earlier, he had the perfect life, and he had this girlfriend, he was so happy, he had a good job, And, why would he do this? It just doesn't make sense that a show would
Yeah.
call it like
Take all
to
of that
me,
away. Yeah.
something says there was something else happening maybe they weren't aware of. And I'd be curious to actually hear what his girlfriend
And
what her
family did.
thoughts
Oh, okay.
on,
Yeah.
what happened were.
Yeah, that's true.
We don't know, but it would be interesting to know.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in tonight, and we will see you hopefully next week.
Yeah, let us
For
know
the
how you
random
like the
episode.
app and stuff.
All right, later.
Later. Is that it? Is that how we're ending it? That was terrible. It was so bad. We were talking over each other. Bye.